Welcome. I am Cynthia Lawson Jaramillo. I'm co-founder and director of the DEED Lab at Parsons School of Design. I've been delighted by this study group, and I'm so grateful that you're joining us today for the third and final deep dive into this important research. The DEED Lab has been studying the artisan sector since 2007. Our focus is sustainable livelihoods for artisans and their children, and our work has included fieldwork programs, academic research, and strategic partnerships. As a research lab in a design school, we're particularly concerned with how designers and entrepreneurs act in the artisan sector, and with the goal of creating sustainable and mutually beneficial partnerships. Much of our learning has been with and from Indigenous communities, so I want to honor them as we recognize Native Heritage Month, this month of November. I encourage everyone to get to know the ancestral and Indigenous roots of the land you are on, and of the various practices you lead and the skills and various knowledges that you use. Earlier this year, I was delighted to learn about 200 Million Artisans. We were honored by their invitation to serve as knowledge partners in the business of handmade research. Today, our focus is India's so-called informal economy, which comprises the bulk of the nation's livelihood opportunities. A striking 93% of India's workforce is in the informal sector with no minimum wages or any kind of social security. Of this, 200 million people depend on craft for their livelihoods. India's artisan economy also falls squarely within the informal or unorganized economy, one usually perceived as working outside the formal frameworks of labor laws, taxation, and finance. Through the course of the research, 200 Million Artisans found that the informal nature of India's artisan sector is not one of its own doing or choosing. With the right support, the small to medium enterprises working with India's artisan economy can close the gap between the actual and the potential and make way for the new formal. We characterize the new formal as a hybrid approach that combines best practices of the informal, such as cultural networks, behaviors, and the formal, social protection, data, mobility, and perhaps more, in India's artisan economy. Informal modes of work among rural creative cultures inform business models of creative enterprises who adapt to local contexts to drive productivity, profits, and innovation. Today's conversation attempts to present some of these insights from the enterprises we featured in Business of Handmade, while discussing the benefits of incorporating the new formal into the artisan sector. We'll have a moderated conversation followed by a Q&A. I encourage you to please participate throughout the event, dropping questions at any time into the chat so that we may incorporate them into the conversation. Priya?
So much, Cynthia. I hope everybody can hear me, and I hope everybody in the audience can, and really thank you for joining us here for the last study group. And we've been really heartened and thankful for your participation. So please continue to ask questions. We don't assume to know all the answers, but we're really trying to find a sort of roadmap to understand this really interesting and intricate sector, so to speak. I'm going to start off by saying, I don't know if people have had a chance to sort of go through the report, but really what Cynthia talked about was the new formal, where often for us, at least growing up, there is a, we've always been told that, you have to look for jobs that take you to, that give you an office, an air-conditioned office. You basically go from home to your, wherever your workplace is. And that's really what the formal sector, and we're told to aspire for formalization in our lives. And often we all think that the formal structures, as it were, the formal jobs are the only kind of jobs to aspire towards. But when we started looking at the craft sector in as part of Business of Handmade, we realized that most craft-based enterprises were not setting up factories. They were really not trying to set up, the kind of uniform spaces where everybody came to work. They started at 9 and ended at 5, and those were not the kind of structures that they were building. And the enterprises and their leaders that you see today, in fact, run some really interesting enterprise that have very decentralized approaches to even formalization. So I'd like to start by putting the question out to all enterprises. Um, that what are, or first of all, are there advantages to keeping the informal sector informal? And I would like to invite any of the enterprises to jump in and start speaking, or I can call you out, whichever you prefer.
So I'd like to say this. I like to take it first because in the case of Kashmir, I've always maintained that it's very important. I mean, the informal sector, the informality of the whole sector, the region, the geography, the climate has actually helped Kashmir, or rather led to the whole informality. In the sense, like what I've always maintained is that, because there is lack of private enterprise, there is no other alternative, or like I said, there's limited alternative sources of employment in Kashmir, which is why craft tourism has all grown. And there's a lot of political instability, and we know it. There is violence, there's constant curfews. So with all those shutdowns, how does this large craft rich, it's an absolutely craft rich community, like how you have Kutch and you have Rajasthan, we have Kashmir with very high level of craftsmanship. So they have survived through this informality, and actually they have grown because of it. Because if there's a curfew, you can't, even if someone sets up a certain infrastructure, the artisan cannot reach that infrastructure, but they can continue to work at home. They continue to reach their suppliers through back gullies and everything, through secret passages. I've seen them, but they reach, and that's how the work happens. So I think in Kashmir, it's very important. Plus, it's so cold, so if I ask everybody to come to a workshop somewhere, they can't. Like, in Kashmir right now, 10 o'clock is where actually people start. Actually, 11 o'clock is when people start working, and by 4:30, it's dark. So they close shop, but they can always go back home where there is, if there is a large order, they'll continue working through the night. But they can't do that if there's a workshop. And with so many curfews and ISRS shutdowns, they can't. There's so much restricted access.
Thanks, Shruti. I think you've been one of your story and the story of C2K has in many ways been one of the champions of also taking informality quite seriously. So thanks for sharing that. Kirti, do you want to go next? Because I know P-TAL also struggles and did struggle in many ways with working with informal artisans. So if you could maybe share the story of, how you navigate as a social enterprise, navigate this challenge.
So I would like to add to what Shruti said, that of course, like, for me, how I look at it in Amritsar, there are no challenges like Kashmir would have, but the challenges like, setting up a whole workshop where artisans can come and work would in itself be a very capital intensive model when they can work at their home. So why would they come to a workshop set up by us? And they are in their own flexibility. But what we struggled was to integrate that sort of understanding that work is important, waking up at 8, and because we were paying them fairly well, like more than what they were earning otherwise. So they stopped giving quantities because they were very satisfied with the less amount of work. They were making much more money, so they didn't want to. Even we struggle with it now. So we have to constantly tell them that why not. So that is we have to keep training them on their financial, like how do you plan finances. We have started formalizing it in our own way, where we are trying to teach them about we are going to cut your TDS, because that's the kind of, you can further get loans based on that. And we like further, I know how mental health could impact artisans work, so we are looking at that aspect of things also. In informal sector, when like they are constantly working with hand, and what they are making is a piece of art that will go to people, so their mental health will affect a lot. So that way is also the domestic challenges, which how they treat their family, or how the things are, all those things are very important, and which P-TAL is working at stabilizing it at every level. Like on every stage we are looking at what is important now. So right now, health insurance, because of the age of artisans and because of the whole situation that we, of course, like, you know, we were still supporting them when they had any health challenges, but then it becomes very expensive for us because we didn't have any insurances for them. So that's when we started looking at health insurances for all artisans who are associated with us. And if we think that, okay, you know, P-TAL wants to grow as a brand, so we want to replicate it to other clusters. So formalization in the informal sector, like, you know, integrating that idea of that you have to work from 9 to say 8 in the evening or say 6 in the evening, consistency is the key. It's working. I mean, it has worked for us, and we are still, like, you know, struggling and making our way through it, where they are able to, you know, later get loans through the TDS that we are depositing to the government. So all those things, but we are formalizing it in our own advantage.
So what you're basically saying is that you're also working around the cultural nuances that perhaps exist in places like Punjab, for example. And you're saying that, you know, you can work out of homes or you can work out of your workshops, but you still need to adhere to some of the more formal aspects that we probably expect in our offices or in our factories.
Yeah, exactly. So like when we say work from home,
Mhm.
when we say work from home, so we wake up at 9 and we go to work and are working till 6, and that's consistency, and that's what keeps us going, and, you know, the company we are working for growing. So that's what we expect from them, that, you know, we'll only grow if you work, you will only grow if we grow. So, you know, it has to go hand in hand. So we are trying to formalize it, and, you know, like people like us, like there'll be, I live in Panchkula, and around here I see a lot of NGOs. So if I have to get things woven, so, you know, it's better to go to give that stuff to an NGO who will then get the work coordinated through the whole process, rather going to an artisan, because then that's a whole lot of, you know, going through that informal sector. So I think formalization in form of an NGO or in form of a social enterprise, like, it's very important for a cluster to grow.
Thanks. I'm going to bring in Ami here, and I can see her smiling away because clearly you have probably faced all these challenges given the diverse, you know, the number of geographies you work in. So please do jump in. I'd love to hear more.
Thank you so much, Priya, and thank you so much, Shruti and Kirti, to set the tone. And as you rightly said, we've been in this sector. I mean, taking a minute here before the audience joined in, what we were discussing is that this is really an extremely informal sector, and in our all small means, we are trying to formalize it. So industry's journey has always been inspired by the indigenous production methods that our craft sectors had and always had in some way or the other, you know, and the entire angle of customization and that whole barter conversational system of developing products. So keeping that knowledge in mind, we realize that it's important to scale this work, and you can't just scale by enhancing what they're doing currently, but to also bring learnings from the adjacent sectors. It could be something as simple as the lean methodology that we've actually implied into our basket making processes, where we realize if one woman could make one basket in a day, if it was 4 of them put together, where the one who was better at making the base made the base, the one who was better at making the sidewalls did that, the production actually tripled, which was by itself so alarming and I would say rewarding to them as well. So I think they also saw it and they said, okay, there's a benefit here. So these are the steps that we keep taking, that you learn from the adjacent sectors and bring that knowledge into this sector to further just make it more robust. In fact, we've gone a step ahead and said, okay, fine. In a lot of the pockets, traditional artisans have actually gone off to do other things. So let's look at it as an economic opportunity, because women, and we by and large work with women, 95% of our workforce, our teams are women, and we call them the owner of the enterprise. And we said, you know what, staying at home, you definitely may be doing good, great, but how about alongside also doing this? And giving them an insurance, simple things about why child labor is not what we want to encourage, simple things, and how important it is to stay away from fire and work, because we work largely with natural fibers. And then we see them corresponding and going forward. And the entire entrepreneur rising. So most of them have now come back saying, you know what, earlier I didn't want to walk, even though it was a 5-kilometer walk, I didn't want to come to a unit, but now I'm happy to do that if need be, but I'm loving working from home. They've also got that whole spirit of, you know, why can't I also do this? So some of them have started selling idli batters and things like that. So I think that entire energy flows in. And yeah, so I think we're all taking our steps to make as much of the sector in the best possible manner. Thanks, Priya. Back to you.
So in some sense, Ami, would it be fair to also ask, is informality, to maintain that kind of informality important, the flexibility? Would you agree with, in some ways, the idea of the new formal, where you have to co-opt some aspects of informality and some aspects of the formal world? And could you give us an example of maybe how industry is doing that? And how does it translate to your women, for example?
So absolutely, I think a blend is very, very important. There is no shying away from that. And especially now, I mean, COVID has even taught us even a lot more than what we ever expected to do in this lifetime, you know, working out of an absolutely adverse situation. And I think industry always working this simple thing that, you know, let's try and look at small changes. So if a woman is able to do, say, 6 hours of work, let's ensure that the minimum wage is used to calculate her incomes. And it's extremely transparent to her. It's shown to her from day one that, you know, this is what you would earn, making it absolutely clear and thing, you know, you have to have a bank account. And we also, demonetization. And even before that, you know, it's great to have a bank account, but then our husbands use a bank account. So how do you train them on that? You know, this is how you go into an ATM, draw money, and so on. So I think that entire experience of training them and showing them the small wins is always there. And I'm opening it out, you must come and meet us anytime in Ethiopia or in Madurai or anywhere where we are. And they would tell you that, you know, this woman who's walking in, which is me, she works for me, because we put the entire professional management layer to support these women. Because the women were very clear that, you know what, we want to make the product, we don't want to do business. So be it quality, be it dispatch, we got in people like us to support them. And now we see them ranking up, you know. So our chemical is handled by a woman who's literate. And she said, you know, without shoes, you can't enter my chemical department. So things like that have brought into place. And yeah, so I think it's important. So the entire value chain also gets flourished with that.
Thanks, Ami. Rafael, I'd like to, sorry, am I pronouncing your name right?
Yes.
Wrong. So, but yeah, thank you. You've been listening to, you know, these diverse stories from the different enterprises, and you've also read Business of Handmade. Do you see any downside to really establishing the new formal? Can we truly move towards this, given that almost 60% of the world's economy is informal? So is there a merit in sort of bringing these two ways of thinking together and then moving forward? Do you also see downsides here?
Yes, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for inviting me to this discussion. It's really amazing to be here. I'm very grateful. So as I'm listening to, you know, co-panelists and reading the case studies, it seems pretty obvious the case, you know, the economic case for bringing the informal sector in the formal economy, right? And I could speak like an economist, and we can like go through these increase in efficiency and quality control and increase in standards of living and more visibility to the sector, because now it's part of GDP. You know, you can start accounting for these things. You can see, you know, markups and overheads and, you know, all this good accounting concepts. You also have labor laws and you know, something that's empowering for workers, right? A kind of a change in mindset, with artisans now being a little bit more like entrepreneurs and, you know, taking ownership for their work, sharing responsibilities, interacting with customers in different ways, you know, getting instant feedback. So these things are all really positive. But what the harder question to ask is what you're asking, which is, you know, is there anything that perhaps could be lost, right? And what I think is interesting here is, you know, how history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes, right? And so if we look, for example, at the historical lessons of the Industrial Revolution, right? So what happened in Europe and how we went from pre-industrial European societies to, industrial societies, it's very interesting because people were working from home, right? And then we created the factory, and that resulted in the long run in poverty alleviation, but it was achieved at the cost of a complete reorganization of labor and production. And there was a long-term cost, which was a cultural dislocation. And so I think the question to ask here is there a different path that's possible for artisan communities here, where we, we don't completely uproot these communities from their cultural fabric and we don't destroy it in that process? So that to me is an interesting question. So if you think about, for instance, the kind of loss of control over the product that can happen when you start putting people in a factory, that's not, I'm saying the new formal is not putting people in a factory, but this is what I think is so interesting about this concept of the new formal, is that it's a hybrid, right? We want to retain some things that are working and learn from history to go forward with a different path. So that I think is fascinating. The other thing I'll just mention here is in terms of improving standards of living, there's a real question of how can we achieve, these wage advances and labor laws, but without also creating dependency, right? And this path forward seems to me interesting to think about.
Can I add something here, Priya?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
So, actually, I totally agree with this. And this is one point which I missed saying then also, was that, I feel this informal setup, and I can speak truly for Kashmir, but also it holds across other craft sectors also, is that, the family unit is very strong because of this, that, they learn to work within their community, within their families, vis-a-vis exactly the same thing. The Industrial Revolution forced us to move away. There were such cultural shifts. So Kashmir as a society is very close, yes, for its political reasons, yes, for its geography, but also because of the culture that there is. And the family unit is really, really strong over there. And they protect each other like anything. So, and just like how we feel that, urbanization has forced migration, these things will also again start creeping into this sector also, as anyway we're tackling these issues. So, I when I was speaking to a colleague of mine today in the morning about this discussion, and who's also a professor there in Kashmir, and he said a very nice thing to me. He said, प्यार को प्यार ही रहने दो, उसको रिश्तों का नाम मत दो. So, it's like, just, let us enjoy what it is. There is beauty in what is happening also. Yes, there is a need for systems. There is a need for processes, which I think like Industree is doing, P-TAL is doing. There is need for all of that. We do need to bring in, which I think all of us as social enterprises are bringing in. But I don't think we should disturb or look down on that and disturb the apple cart so much and cause problems now. Now, as of today, we're enjoying working from home. Everybody who was going to offices is loving the fact that they have this flexibility. That yes, maybe 3 days in a week, I can work from home. Nobody wants to go back to 100% full time. And that's exactly that just shows what human nature is.
I'm just going to jump in here also to talk about, so one of the challenges with informality, there's also a lot of stigma attached to the idea of informality, because here we're talking about the fact that, people can take advantage of informal workers. The fact that people are not they're not like getting paid, say, living wages, they don't have access to social protections, insurance. You as enterprises, you are taking care of it, but that is really the big fear when communities remain informal. So what more as craft enterprises, or even in the artisan economy, when we have to bring in, or if we have to formalize this informal cultural community, what more is needed to be done for our artisan communities to start adopting and adapting to some of the formal structures that are essential moving forward as well? And I mean, feel free to jump in. Ami, Shruti, Kirti, you guys all perhaps have even examples of what is needed for this kind of just protection of communities that are vulnerable.
I would just say that, one, I think they need financial understanding. They need a lot of financial education is one thing. And, education on legal issues. If we can translate that, that will really help.
Yeah, and just adding to Shruti's point, I think it's training by all means, by practical experience, by showing them the light, and it takes time. It does take time. It's almost like training a child. So you have to repeat the information, and you keep at it. And they also then they'll see the example from within the society. So we had someone who said, why do you want to have an insurance? Why are you doing this? And we said, just do it. Hang on there. And she had a issue in the house, and she realized that the insurance was so beneficial, because otherwise she would have gone to a local money lender, and they would have come to that whole, losing land and losing whatever or what they don't have as well. So I think that the entire education is important, and it has to be given in bite sizes. So we've also started doing something like, give them small bite size information and go back to it and touch upon it. But that's the continuous thing. And also just adding here that we also try and work in areas where the women, it's not more than 5 kilometers. So, if they have to walk to work, it's good, because that sisterhood feeling is something that this community still needs. Like what Shruti said, it's a family unit, but now when they work in smaller pockets, they at least have a woman who understands her for her challenges and all of that. So that we really build on that sisterhood thing, And then, of course, they always see the benefit of this income being important for the next generation. And immediately education for the next generation improving, nutrition improving. So they see that additional income is so much important for them. So I think it's just about showing them that and working along that lines.
Yeah, but like for me, it's more like, because the community I am working with is like a male community, and it's completely male dominated. So challenges are very different. For like, they are talking about the unity, I would like to say that they are very, very competitive. My artisans, like, they are living 2 blocks away from each other, and they're only concerned about what the guy next door is doing and how much work he has gotten. So you have to consistently keep telling them that, due to this particular reason, anybody from outside can easily take an advantage of the whole circumstance in the situation. We have to like constantly, because maybe being male, giving them like, to the younger generation, when we try to communicate finances to them, things like TDS and things like income tax returns, it's easier for the younger generation to understand, but for the older one, they're still very apprehensive of that. But they all have like kids, so we try to go through kids when we have to explain them these things. But unity remains a huge challenge for us. Like, you have to unite and then work.
But Kirti, in your case, you also ended up, because you were facing these kind of challenges, didn't you also decide to sort of set up SSGs and bring in also formalization through that route? And how did that work out?
We tried doing SSGs, but then like it backfired again. For us, it didn't work out very well, because like SSG has to have a head, and we had a grant, a government grant, which went through a society, and was into the SSG account. But we didn't access account of the SSG. The head of the account wouldn't work for like next 1 or 2 months, and he's like, all the money belongs to me. And it took a toll over the entire process that we were trying to do, everything that we were trying to do, because like there was a big fight that how does all the money belong to him. And then like it took us, we were like, we don't even want to touch the money that came in the society. We were like, that remains with the society, and we have to take a different route. Like, this is not working out. Yeah, like it didn't help building a SSG. So it's just like one-on-one, one on them, and younger generation is smarter than the older one. That's what we realized when we are working. It's easier to explain them stuff. It's easier to show them the monetary benefits if they work together. Like, there are so many, like Emmy said also, like slowly even we are realizing, one person is good at welding, so let him only do the welding. One person is good at working with copper, so let him do only copper, and things like that. You start developing processes like that, and which is very important and they see monetary benefits, and younger generation is happy doing it, but the older one is again fighting on the stuff that, okay, then everything that I am earning has to be divided and all, but the time is also reducing. No.
I'm going to jump in here quickly. So one of the questions that also this brings to mind is, so again, when we talk about formalization, eventually when we say moving to becoming formal, we are also talking about becoming tax-paying citizens. I mean, right now, nobody is a tax-paying citizen if you fall under the informal economy. But that's just one piece of it. And it's assumed that the informal communities or informal cultural communities are remaining informal because they don't want to pay tax. I mean, so that's one at least perception around this. But if we have to also look at it from the craft enterprise and the artisan community perspective, how do policies, government policies like GST, demonetization, even access to government schemes, because clearly there are some gazillion government schemes, but we don't know what is actually available and accessible. The design of policy itself, how does that kind of aid, the further informality of these communities? Could you perhaps speak to that? Ami, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think, Priya, you've raised up a point which is so important, because I think while today is a day that a lot of things have changed for our farmers, but a lot of the policies are driven towards them, and this sector really gets ignored. So I think it's people like the stakeholders that are right here who need to bring in that thing. So if even for the insurances, we go to the government schemes, we understand them and provide that. I guess it's the people, it will be us who will have to link these things up. And yes, agency at that level is very important. It has to be built. I think as a community, we need to work towards it. I think, and it's only possible as a community, because it's not a one woman or one man army that's going to be able to change these policies. But we do see some light in it, a very, very snail pace, but I think it will.
Yeah, could you maybe give us an example of some of the impact of these policies, especially when it comes to, like, the bigger organizations, obviously, do not get impacted, but it's the micro enterprises and the artisan communities that do get impacted. Could you give us an example of what that impact potentially looks like for some of these communities, especially post some of the policies?
Yeah, I think when GST was introduced, it was like a havoc for all of us, and also understanding the policy, by itself. But then I think eventually what they also understood was that it was an additional point, and you need that one smart one to explain it to you. And then and it's also about getting that, you have to work towards getting that smart person in, that, okay, help us too. So I think there is some amount of willingness, and as Kriti said, if you work with a younger generation, they kind of are looking at it as an enterprise, as opposed to the older ones who look at it as a more barter and it's not a transactional journey for them. So I think it's that mind shift, which is very gradual, but it is there, and it needs a lot of lobbying from all of us here at that level as well. Yeah.
Does anyone else want to jump in terms of some of the impact of policies or how you have navigated that, Kirti or Shruti?
I mean, we only started our operations when GST was already launched. So we built with GST, like, so we were aware of all the GST laws. Yeah, for artisans, it did impact them, because they were very vendors started refusing to give raw materials without GST, and for artisans to pay that 18% extra on their raw material, which they are not even going to get back, became a huge problem. Because at one point, I mean, for us, like, we have a GST number, and we buy raw material and we get all the GST returns and all, but for at the artisan level, who is not having GST number to directly procure raw materials, became difficult after the GST was introduced. Like, they stopped doing it completely. They used to buy from us, that we'll buy it from you, give it to us without GST. Then we started doing that also. We do that. We still do that.
Raphael,
Priya,
yeah, sorry. Shruti,
no.
No, go
So-
ahead if you have something to, so then I can shoot the question at Rafael, because as an economist, I'd really like to understand how policy plays out when you also have to navigate policies that are not well thought through in situations like this.
So who should go, Rafael, or should I?
No. I mean, yeah. Shruti, if you have like a quick comment to make, then I'd like to go to Rafael.
No,
But
not
go
on
ahead.
that. I mean, I just wanted to just say that, yes, demonetization was difficult for all the artisans. And I think you are right to say that, yes, they do take advantage of the situation that, they don't want to do GST also. It's very complicated also. I mean, it is a very complicated task for an artisan. It's difficult for us also. We also struggle with it on a day-to-day basis. So, but I would say that, and sometimes it's convenient for the artisans to stay within the ambit of informality and hence not pay those taxes. I don't think they have, and I don't think they want to. So this is the crux of the thing. We only, like, C2K is different in the sense that, we anyway do empowerment of the entrepreneur. So we anyway work with an entrepreneur. We don't work with the artisanal wage earner, which I think Kirti or Ami does. We don't work with them. We work with the entrepreneurial level, at the entrepreneurial level. So for us, it's easier for us to, we anyway only build their capacities, empower them with more knowledge sharing and with training them. So that's our approach. So we are not looking at the actual last mile artisan, because we don't, that's not the model. Our model was always building entrepreneurship in the valley.
Rafael, I'd love you to jump in, because I mean, taxation is a huge conversation when we talk about informality. But as you listen to these stories, where is the middle ground even for institutional actors to come in, and where is it that they can come in to sort of navigate these kind of challenges that communities face?
Sure. I mean, that's a byproduct of making an informal sector formal, is indeed it's going to be counted as part of the economy, and then it becomes taxed. And that can be a problem if these communities don't feel well represented in the political system, right? So, taxation without representation, right? I'm paying taxes, but is the government investing in our communities? Are we getting good schooling, or are we just paying the tax and we're like left behind? So that would be one challenge, but it takes a long time to bridge the trust, right? If the trust isn't there, but I don't know for sure if it is or isn't. You guys know much better than I do. In terms of the tax policies, the economist's answer is always there's like that right level of tax, right? So if the tax is too low, then you're actually hurting the economy, because you are not subsidizing the kind of government spending on public goods that are needed. And then as you increase the tax rate, you kind of reach a sweet spot, an optimal level where GDP is maximized and everybody's income is maximized, and that's the level to aim for. And then if you go over that level, then you kind of kill the economy. The tax is too high, right? And GDP goes back down. So there's an ideal level to aim for. But I think what's more important to work on is more the mentality of people, like, why do I want to pay my taxes or not, has to do with trust and sense of being well represented in the government. And that's not so much an economic question, and there's like a host of other issues that come along. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks, Rafael. I mean, we're almost at 8:15. If there are any questions from the audience, we can start taking some. Otherwise, there's always so much to talk to the enterprises and learn from them. Cynthia, do you want to jump in? Do you have any questions that?
I have one. Yeah, I have a question that I had put in the chat. I have heard loud and clear from artisans in Guatemala, not everyone, but from many, that the dream for their children is that they finish school and that they end up with a blue collar job in an office somewhere. They're not excited by this vision of working from home. They appreciate the flexibility to be able to complete all of the tasks they have to complete on a given day, but they very much associate working from home with, you know, being less than in the hierarchy of society and of jobs and of the workplace. So my question was, are we maybe unintentionally glorifying a bit this idea of working from home? Do all artisans have the kind of home, live in the kind of home where they would enjoy working in? When we think about multi-generational homes, homes that are lacking basic needs, and how could we also imagine these notions of co-working spaces? There are many examples in the artisan sector of artisans traveling to a place so that they continue to be in community, but that they be provided some kind of structure while still supporting that flexibility. So I was asking about that. Not sure if any of the panelists have any thoughts on that.
I think Ami would perhaps actually be able to speak to that, because the industry model is not technically working from home.
Yeah, thanks, Priya and Cynthia. So Cynthia, I do agree that, and we've seen this. When I say agree, because we've seen this, that the next generation doesn't really want to join force here. But I think the whole fact that there is an informal sector, there are smaller working units where they see the entire ownership piece, because that's when they really, even the second generation, see that, okay, we are owners of our business. So that's the approach that entire enterprise and entrepreneur drivenship has to be, and that's the thing that we populate and we really build on. So the fact that when you go to work, that place is your place, you define your working hours, that empowerment is something that we work towards. And we've seen the benefits of it. We have the second generation joining us, into the company as well, saying, I see my mother, she could do it, and why can't I do it? And because that's it. So yeah.
I think Cynthia, I mean, what you brought up is a really interesting point. It's really, is there aspirational mobility that we are creating? Because it's not enough to say, hey, you work from home and XYZ and all of those things, but it's also to figure out, are they growing as people? Are they feeling satisfied at work? Are they earning enough? Do they get to buy the bike that they want and the television that they want and so on and so forth, which is exactly, people like us also aspire for things like that. And is the new formal building in that aspirational mobility, which also becomes a key question. The second piece about, do we remain informal? I feel for a lot of women, and it does not, again, there is no one size fits all, but in some cases we have seen that women can't step out of their homes. In case of Jaipur rugs, we heard about them last year that, okay, my color is like changing away. I can see myself changing. But anyways, but we can see that there are many communities where the women are not allowed to step out of their home. So can we then navigate around that? And in many communities, especially in South India, where industry works, women want to step out of home and they want to move to, say, a unit and work out of there. So I think there is merits and demerits in both, but as long as we are able to perhaps, look at the 5 things that we're talking about, that there is social protections embedded, that there is aspirational mobility created, there is trust. I think trust, we haven't spoken enough about trust, but perhaps that is a big piece that even enterprises can speak to, that how trust plays an important role in the relationships that they end up having with their artisans. And the decentralized nature, and decentralization is not necessarily an Amazon with factories, but it is different small units that still serve as a factory of some sort. So there are multiple such things that I feel the new formal in some ways accommodates. But yeah, there is no questions from the audience. So I'm, I would love for the enterprises to perhaps talk about even the aspect of trust that you have to build in with the artisans that you work with. And how does that pan out? If you can maybe talk to that.
I would like to add in here that trust, it remains a huge aspect, especially when you start out. Say, starting 1 or 2 years is the time you are going to be struggling to build trust. But, once they have seen you not disappearing on them, paying them on time, giving them consistent work, that builds a lot of trust. They can call you they literally call you at any time of the day, and they don't understand that you have cut their phone once, so they will continuously call you if they have to say something. So that builds a lot of trust. Consistency with the community builds a lot of trust. And to even add up on that point, where we were talking about, that does younger generation would really want, I remember the older generation would really say that thathera nahi banna. Like, we would never want to see our kids to be a thathera. But now is the time when, during COVID, a guy who was working in a kapda factory earning 15,000 rupees, of course, there were no jobs. So he came, joined his father's business, and he was making so much money of making those utensils that he is doing it now. And he's like, mera beta bhi yahi karega. And he's very happy doing it. So we don't do cost cuttings at the artisan end. And that remains the aspect of our enterprise, that our cost cutting on the, when we are negotiating with the buyers, when we are negotiating anywhere, we make sure that it does not impact artisans at any level. And that, till now it has remained one of the major aspects, that we want them, they're young, because the community is very small and we want it to grow, we want more people, so we have to give that kind of monetary benefit. The younger generation also has to see that kind of money in the craft, so for them to join in further. And at a local community level, the opportunities can grow. Like, when an enterprise grows, say suppose Jandiala Guru, I am trying to build an enterprise there, local opportunities for CAs, for financial advisors, everything grows. There are jobs for literally everybody then, like slowly, for people managing the warehouse to dispatch to the local economy grows at whole.
Thanks, Kirti. Shruti or Ami, do you want to jump in about how trust plays in, or does it play is it a factor at all in in the relationships that you end up having with your artisans?
I think trust is crucial, because and seeing us in and out every time is very important. And I also feel that when you bring in, just touching on to what Kirti said, is that when you bring in your buyer and show them the entire, how the works of it, that also builds trust within the community, that you are not here just coming and training, but you are showing them the economic opportunity, which I think is very important, because you can't subsidize this sector anymore. So if you make it like you have to get that sweet balance and come to that sweet spot, this is a transaction, this is your buyer, this is what they want, and bringing in that culture is very important. So I think, and they see that there is a repercussion. So if something goes wrong, there is a repercussion. They see it. They may not be they may not understand it, but when they see it, they say, okay, fine. So the next time around, they will come back and say, we'll do a better job, or can you help us with this? So I think it's a journey, and it is to be experienced. But yeah, bringing the economic opportunity and showing them the buyer side, the customer side, also opens a lot of avenues for them, which further then strengthens this relationship.
Shruti?
I'll add, again, I talk in the Kashmir context, that there is a huge trust deficit there. As a community, as a society, they do not trust outsiders. And so you have to address that issue. So again, as C2K as an organization, of course, the development side of it, we have partnered with the local organization. And generally what happens in the valley is, because of the situation, people come in for a year and then you are never able to come back again. Because I had spoken once earlier in a previous discussion that the ROI is so poor. For any funder, for any designer, any organization to invest in Kashmir, it's really tedious. Because, while it's easy for me to go to one village anywhere, whether it's Punjab, Haryana, UP, or down south, it's not easy for me to do that in Kashmir. So there is a general trust deficit. So like I said, we've addressed it by working with the local organization. And now that they know that we are coming back year on year, month on month, we're back. We're working with them. So they do believe us more than the economics. But of course, like Kirti said, the hard truth is the economics. If you can get them the business and the livelihood, they will follow you, they will believe you. But since we went the other route first, we worked were training them more, we were hand-holding them to get to the market. So now we have built that trust. So like, if I do not call them up on an Eid, or if I do not do, I do not call them up once a month, they get very offended and upset that, then I've not, so, that those relationships, and it's all about relationships in this sector, as everybody will be saying this.
I can see David, has put in some comment. David, would you want to jump in and share your thoughts?
Well, sure. I can just reiterate what I've said, but I've worked with Women Weave and Mahesh for a really long time, and it seems to me that one of the values for the women in that community is they want to get out of the house. They they don't want to be home in their little house alone. They want to have a community, and they want to have that teamwork and sense of working toward a common goal. So in that situation, I don't think the organization would have near the kind of success that it does at building community without gathering people together daily.
I mean, the same can be said with, I think Industree works with a similar model, rangSutra works with a similar model, but I think they also account for the fact that there are certain cultural nuances that have to be taken into account depending on the community that you work with. So it's not a hard and fast rule, unlike traditional factories where, hey, if you can't make it to work, then, XYZ, da, 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 da. This is more, the community is intentionally fostered by many of these enterprises, but not in the traditional factory-like setting, but in more of a community and community unit and a community center-like setting, which is perhaps why it sort of comes into the whole new formal space.
I think it's more like, I'm so sorry, I'm just jumping in here, because I think the whole thing, adding to David, I'm sorry, and David just cutting in, but the whole collective model part is what really resonates with the women, particularly with women, because we've been working largely with women, and this whole collective thing that, they can go to some place, they have it for themselves, and the economic part of it. So I think that collective model, it's a new way of looking at the business, and they see that, and so yeah. Back to you, David. I think you were saying something. So sorry.
Yeah.
Well, I'm just following. I just have the experience in that area, so I speak to what I've seen in that area, and in terms of the hours and the pace, the women have a huge say in what they can commit to, what they can deliver, and still maintain their domestic work, which is heavy. So I think women we start to come to work around 10 in the morning, or maybe a little earlier, depending on what they've finished at home, and then leave by late afternoon, 4 or 5. And those are kind of reduced hours, and it puts the prices a little higher. So there's a little bit of a decline in efficiency to accommodate the women's lives, but that's the model, and it seems to work there.
Thanks, David. Cynthia, do you want to jump in? Or Rafael, if you have any last thoughts on what you've heard today, would love to. I think we are already at time.
Yeah, I mean, I brought up this idea of choice in the chat. So choosing, and some of our work in the DEED Lab has been that the privilege of choosing how to spend our time, where to spend our time, where to work. I think the pandemic has shed a huge spotlight on those kinds of privileges. And absolutely, Sydney's comment in the chat, these are not new issues, but we do, there are many broken parts of the systems underlying the artisan sector. And that's really what keeps us engaged with the topic. So I really appreciate today's conversation.
Thank you all. I mean, I guess this is the last of the study group. I think I'm going to miss it. Now it's become, every Friday you have to be ready for the study group. I feel like, a part of me will be lost after this. But thank you so much, everyone, for all the audiences, for everybody who's attended the study groups. To all the speakers, thank you so much for your support and for your amazing stories and for the amazing work that you're doing. Really, your stories have been our inspiration, and we hope to continue learning from you. Just a very quick note, because I'm going to make a very shameless plug. We have an auction coming up for which, some of the biggest names in India's handmade world have donated handcrafted pieces. This includes everything from textiles to design to even travel experiences. So if you want to travel in India and stay at a nice royal palace, that's also available. But essentially, it's each of this product and experience speaks to the Handmade in India story. And whatever money we hope to raise, 100% of the money will go to Creative Dignity, which is already doing a lot of work around rehabilitation and recovery for artisan communities. So please do follow 200M and check out some of these experiences and products, and please do support. Thanks. Thanks, India.
Yeah, thank you so much, Priya. I so appreciate Priya agreed to do not one, but 3 events with the DEED Lab. We so value the research that you all have put together, Priya, Aparna, who's here, and everyone on your team. And I'm grateful for your partnership. Questions in the chat about how can we collaborate? People want to continue the conversations. And in the DEED Lab, we have actually thought about maybe doing monthly gatherings where we come together, salon style, set the agenda together with whomever shows up, because there is a lot of work to be done still. So thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for joining us. And I see a hand from Anjali. So perhaps we'll take, Anjali, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to know how we can collaborate. I wanted to join the group of Business of Handmade and 200 Million Artisans. I think so. I've already got the invite from them. So I'm already part of that. So because I am also kind of supporting, like I want to support a very major group of artisans basically. And they are also diminishing because I really realized when I was talking to one of my workers who used to work for me, that these girls have somehow lost the opportunity to work, and they were so eager to come back to me, like they were like, we were ready to do anything, give us a chance type of feeling. So I really want, but support is needed. Obviously, one hand cannot do that much, many joined with the other hands, people can do wonders. So I also want to collaborate. So I just wanted to know how to collaborate with everybody.
Well, I'm sure Priya could drop some links in the chat on how to further support the work of 200 Million Artisans. In the DEED Lab, we right now don't have funding for new projects, but always welcome participation in the dialogue. So happy to keep in touch on that. Thank you for asking. So thank you everyone for being here today. Thank you so much to our guest experts. Thank you, Priya and Aparna, on your partnership on the whole series. And be in touch. Let's continue the conversation on Twitter or on social media.
Thank you so much, Cynthia.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.